That's it. All right. Are you comfy? You ready for me to hit the go live button?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, why not?
I'll go for it.
Dun, 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 dun.
Right. I'm gonna assume that that's probably most people are in now because they would have been waiting anyway. All right. So everyone can hear. Everyone's good. All right. Well, hi guys. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Now, Paul, Mr. Meenan, I don't think needs any real introduction. As we did a podcast, one of the many, and we talked about asset management towards the end, and we just had a last minute thought that says, well, we could do it speaking about this openly with people engaging and just listening and stuff instead of making pre-recorded podcasts. So we thought we'd just try a webinar. So Paul has worked very well and very hard over the weekend to put this together. And I'm basically I'm kind of sitting through this as a viewer, and I'm going to try to ask questions from an electrician's perspective, but I'm not going to try to ask stupid questions. But if you have any questions, there's a Q&A box you can ask away, or you can chat in the chat. Let me just check that chat is open for everyone to speak to each other. Yes, it is. All right. Anything else you want me to say, Paul, or shall I just hand over to you, buddy?
There's a question straight away. Did you get much sleep, Paul? No. I agreed to do this on Thursday night and then realised the PowerPoint that I have used in years gone by was woefully insufficient. And if I'm going to do something with the Ninja, I have to level up and be far better. So hopefully you enjoy this. My interpretation and my introduction as to what asset management is to me, but more importantly, I have authored this not from a formal training perspective. This is more of a, this is kind of how I see it, and this is where you can go. I've kind of tailored this more for the commercial, industrial, electrical contractor, those persons working in industry with a relevance to it. For me, it's just a personal love of mine because I wish people would speak more of a common language. And for me, this is yes, it's an introduction to asset management, but this for me has always been, from the day I trained with AMCL at the Asset Management Academy, the science of common sense. And that's what it has always been. Yes, there are challenging parts of it, but we're not going to get too difficult. We are going to just dip in and out of the subject matter and hopefully make it relevant to you guys. One of the key things, I mean, you mentioned manager. Straight away, Dave, you're not a big fan of managers, are you?
It's a struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle because people see managers as just lunatics who chuck money out the windows, almost children to a certain extent. And that's the trouble. People immediately in construction at this very moment, you see construction companies going back to work. People think they're lunatics. You look at the major infrastructure projects going massively over budget. So the initial thought on any sort of major capital expenditure or project is always going to go over budget. It's just a big waste of money. Asset management isn't about necessarily project delivery. Asset management is a much bigger spectrum to look at, and that's what we're going to try and make you guys go out of our nice little comfort zones and look at the big picture. So this is the big picture that a lot of people can recognize. I think it's probably gone around emails for many years. When top level guys look down, all they see is their own efforts to a certain extent, their own feces. And when the bottom level guys look up, they only see what's dumping on top of them. That's your common hierarchical management of a major company. Okay, if you're a domestic house basher, it's effectively you and then your apprentices and whatever other staff you have. But this is a typical hierarchy of a top level manager. I want this done, go away and do it. And everybody else feels terrible. And lots of people hate their jobs and they tend to just want to leave. So it introduces us to the term management. What is management? Because most people look at management as just this poor excuse of an individual who isn't competent. There are some schools of thought that you promoting competence up. If let's just throw myself under the bus. If I became the managing director of Transport for London, I wouldn't be competent at it. And I'd be fine with that, but I would expect those people around me to help me help them. And those people around me in asset management, there's a fantastic term called tribes or tribalism. And it's about various silos and groups of people who work doing amazing and good things, but generally don't talk to each other. And trades do fit into that. We all know within electrical trade, you've got the plumbers, gas fitters, chippies, plasterers, brickies. There's always that natural conflict between the trades. Some companies, they'll all get on really, really well. Others, they won't. On major construction sites, generally the management are refereeing the trades, probably because of poor planning. So what exactly is asset management? Well, with anything in asset management, I always say that life or any journey you go on is a bit of a jigsaw, but asset management's a bit more of an important jigsaw, because when I first started asset management, it was like being given a jigsaw. Okay, I didn't know what the picture was. That was a jigsaw that was given to me when I was training and learning this thing called asset management. I had no idea what it was, so I went away and I developed my knowledge and I started to learn, and I went on the certificate in asset management, and slowly but surely it kind of appeared. But as you can see, it's really difficult to understand and gauge, and only over time and application does eventually it become clear. And the definition of asset management is the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from its assets. Now, what it doesn't say is Tommy Clark's is going to make sure all his people work together to ensure they're not wasting money, because that would be an individual company's interpretation of that. The language that's used by asset managers is very high level, so that no matter who you are, where you're from, everybody has that common framework of understanding, and also everybody will interpret it differently. So if you look then at the notes within ISO 55000, it actually gives you a little bit more, spelt in the American way. Realization of value will normally involve a balancing of cost and risk. Well, we know cost and risk because you hear about that on site when it's, well, I need to do the job, I need to get a tower up. Well, you can't because it'll cost too much money for 5 minutes. Can't you and your mate just do something a bit dodgy? That happens. So these terms are not necessarily completely unfamiliar. Maybe just some of the terms may be unfamiliar. Opportunities of performance, well, senior managers do that. The term activity, if you look, coordinated activity, has a huge meaning. So it can be how you approach activities, how you plan an activity, how you write the plan down, how you implement it, how you resource it, how you fund it, how you get the data from it. So it's a huge ask to just basically common sense coordinate what activities you do across a business. Yeah, the value comes from doing it right, not necessarily, or we can get it done cheaper. Everybody thinks value means cheaper. It doesn't necessarily in asset management. Value to me is not paying twice, as we'll see as we go through this. So let's take a step back. We know that book. It's the book we all row over. There's my copy there. And it is a book that we all row over because, as Dave, we always say, work from the regulations, not to the regulations.
Yeah.
Now, an asset manager, that book, it genuinely is a blip on my radar of the big picture. Okay. But this is how I learned. So when I first started, I was introduced to this document here, which is called PAS 55. Now, PAS means publicly available specification. Okay, it came out 2008, and it was specifically called Specification for Optimized Management. A lot of people misconstrued optimized. Okay, it's just doing as good as you can with what you have. And there was also more guidance for how you apply that, because naturally when you release a standard like the wiring regulations, everybody says, oh, I don't get it. How do I do this? How do I do that? Well, these are the minimum that you work from. It's okay to develop your own interpretation as long as you understand the language and the intent of what they're telling you. And that's one of the key things. Arc fault detection application has been a big debate. If you do the work, you'll realize that arc fault can be used with the right intent, i.e. minimum 2.5 amps, not in commercial industrial, because there's no product at the moment. So having done the work, I know how I can apply the intent of the standard. And it's the exact same with asset management, but asset management is far bigger than just pipes and wires. So step forward, December 2015, the anatomy came out, and hooray, it's free. I'm a big fan of free. Dave, you're a big fan of free. This document is 100% completely free. You can download it from the Institute of Asset Management. After this, please Google it. If they're watching on YouTube, there'll be a link in the comment section. And this is a fantastic pictorial and documented guide introducing you to the concepts and the terminology we're about to look at now. But moving forward from the anatomy, which helped me when I was doing my initial learning, as with anything that's about improvement, the ISO organization released ISO 55000 Asset Management, which is a suite of standards. Now, it's worth noting on virtually all management systems, there's always 3 of them. So 9000 is your introduction to the terms. 9001 is the requirements for the management system, and 9002 is the guidance on it, which is why you only ever see on an electrical contractor's van registered to ISO 9001. You don't get registered to 9000, 9002. They're just the bread for the sandwich. So it's worth knowing that, and it's the exact same principle on 55000 and other management systems, which we'll show you in a minute. Now, as with anything, continuously improving. 2018, a couple of years ago, they've updated the guidelines, which is great because it helps people understand it. It keeps people on that journey of, you're not wrong. You know, the way you're interpreting this is good, and here's how other people are doing it. And there's lots and lots more guidance in subject-specific guidelines, which we'll see at the end, for you to go on a journey. And this is the journey that I've been on. I've naturally gravitated from the regulations all the way through to the applications of an ISO or a British standard. So the next question that people ask, excuse me while I get a sip, is what exactly is an asset? Okay, well, as with anything, it is defined within that standard. And an asset, clause 3.2.1, is an item. It's a thing or an entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. So, okay, this regs book is something that has value to me because I paid for it. I don't want to pay for it again. My tools that I've spent years collecting and paid thousands of pounds for, my test kits, all of that has value to me as an electrician. My buildings, my vehicle fleet, it all has value to me. Now let's look at some examples of what an asset is, because this is where your brain cells start to just open up. Okay, so every single thing in that picture there is an asset. You've got there in the top left, you've got the Barclays Banking Centre. That's the Canary Wharf Crossrail station. But inside there's a commercial, Big Easy. I've actually been in there and ate. It's fantastic. You've then got gas and oil refineries. You've got the national grid, critical infrastructure. You've then got bridges. You've got all these buildings in London. You've got railways, the track, the signalling, the trains, the wheels for the trains. All of it is an asset. So sorry, my dog is pestering me. Moving on. Other assets which are of value. On top right, Gary will recognise this, Thames Tideway. That is an asset of national importance when it opens, henceforth the investment in it. It's something that has value to the government, to the taxpayer, to the people who are going to use it. Financial institutions as well, they have and manage their own assets, although financial institutions, they tend to be more about investments and property portfolios, which if they want to use the principles of asset management and interpret it, they can do. Other things which could be defined as an asset, music, digital content that's of monetary value, copyrighted material can be an asset. YouTube videos, Dave. For instance, your YouTube videos, which generate money for you and your family, you could, as a business, SparkyNinja, define that as something that is of inherent value to you. The one thing I find amazing in the expanse of managing assets is not just concrete and steel and plastics and wires and bits of plant. Netflix, one of the biggest movie studios on a planet, but they don't own any cinemas.
Anything, yeah.
They pretty much don't own anything.
It comes to the key point there. You say it's anything that gives value to an organization, and so much stuff that is actually not physically a thing now. You know, data and copyright, these things actually are of huge amounts of value.
Indeed. But the most important thing of all, top left, people. People, regardless of who or what, absolutely key to any asset management system. Now, the thing I love about asset management, and this is going to sound so weird, people are key to his successes because people have passion, drive, determination. They have character. They have a want to explore and grow. It's just human nature. But the asset management systems should be future proof. They should be ever evolving. So I'll use me as an example. So my measure of success for me as an asset manager in my current role is if I ever got hit by a bus, the next person should still be able to come along, pick up and carry on. Because what gets written down generally gets done. What gets documented and defined gets managed correctly. And people are key to that, but you need to make sure your management system for your business is protected by ensuring that whatever you want to manage as an asset, you define it, you clearly map out how you're going to manage that and what the intent of it is, so that if anything happens to you or staff drop out, you don't have that drop. And that, again, comes down to resource planning, as we'll see in a minute. One of the other big things that is an asset that we're not really talking about enough yet, digital. Internet of Things, yeah? Connected cloud technology, 4 and 5G transmitters, smart technology, pads, mobile phones, smart bikes, you know, everything, interconnectivity and data. I heard someone say the other day, the next gold rush is purely just going to be data. Data is the next gold for businesses. So that's something that's not physical, but it's something tangible that can generate wealth, and people we expect you to manage and control and keep safe. So it's still going to involve some form of physical assets, but the bulk of it will be just purely digital. So let's stop here for a second and let's just take a step backwards, because this is quite exciting. You know, we know what an asset is. We know what asset management is now. I want to give you a little bit of history. So back in the early days, National Grid, we used to have blackouts. We weren't managing the electrical infrastructure very well. And even some of the pylons like to have a skip now and again. But if you do a bit of research, back as far as the 1970s was the first attempt to manage assets over something known as a whole life cycle, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And it was introduced by the government of Terro Technology. Now, Terro Technology is another new term, because there's lots of new terms in asset management, and all Terro Technology standards are these. They're standards that we use on a day-to-day basis, but they're relevant to technology, electrical, and they can be relevant to gas equipment and mechanical equipment. So yeah, back to the 70s, that was pretty much the first attempt. Then it got really serious because Australia, God bless them, in the 1990s, following, they started to develop asset management and the terminology and the frameworks that we see, along with the Global Asset Management Forum. And then there were incidents and disasters in gas and oil on the North Sea. So eventually this common language framework, you saw this earlier on, was adopted. And please note the term highlighted yellow, common language framework. When I talk at work, I talk about whole life cost, etc., etc. And what it was that's been adopted, that PAS 55 has been adopted by the National Generation Transmission, National Grid, and then other infrastructure companies. Water are actually really good at it. Sewage, renewables, transportation, and they used PAS 55 the minute it pretty much came out. So yeah, that then led to ISO 55000, and that's what we have at the moment. That's what we're working to. Now, that was published by the International Standards, or International Organization for Standards, or the ISO. And who are they? Well, they're that red logo. Most electricians, contractors, they normally, when they're driving around, they have these sorts of things on the side of their van, whether they're construction online, safe contractor, NIC, or they have management systems approval, and they get accredited. You can see on the logo below, BSEN 9001. A lot of contractors are registered to quality management, but when you look into quality management, it basically requires you to have 6 procedures, keep records, you know, have quality management systems in regards to control and compliance of faulty and defective goods, management reviews, and a requirement to keep records. That's pretty much it. It's not very detailed, but I always call it the introductory one. It's the intended commitment to quality more than the robust regime. You will have ITPs, you will be snagging, you will do this. Doesn't necessarily have to go into a level of detail. Which then brings you into management systems. Now, I am, if anybody sees that logo moving around, I'm a big fan of continuous improvement because me, having come from an electrician into a manager, I am continually evolving. And one of the things I love about management systems, the good ones, is they're consistently asking you to look back and improve. Now, a chap called William Edwards Deming in the 1950s created the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. Sorry, that's someone just fell off my shelf there. And it just basically created a suite or the intent to develop more and more management system to put better controls and ensure better coordination and cooperation across a number of businesses. These are some of the management systems that you get now. So obviously we start off, we refer to ISO 9001, quality management, but look at look how many different ones there are. Business continuity, information security, environmental management, risk management, collaborative business relationships. I'm stunned that that one even exists. Occupational health and safety used to be 18,000. Energy management, that's a big one now. 55,000. Asset management, ISO 26,000. Social responsibility. What you can see with all of these is there are more and more larger companies that are growing and adopting various parts of it. Eventually, what will end up happening is you'll end up with lots and lots of companies just going out and collecting them and eventually trying to adapt and tailor their processes so that eventually they have a total management system. However, I genuinely do believe the best management system of all is asset management because it gives you the big picture. And this is the problem. So when you first see a management system, all it does is that it just confuses you, man. I'm not going to lie. The first time I went on my certificate in asset management, I probably spent 3 of the 5 days literally looking around the room confused. So all I did, I just looked confused, man. It was just like, what? Hang on a minute. Okay, I really do know inspection and testing, and I know design, and I know electrical installations, and I know about how to cost and how to price and take off and tendering.
It goes to this thing you're going to come up with, though, having to understand the bigger picture, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. It's huge, to be honest with you. And that's the thing. The more you realize, the more you find yourself being confused, the more it should hopefully inspire you to want to go and do the work to start reading. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and read all of them. The only 2 I would actually recommend reading for us would be probably quality management and then asset management, because that's what we're here to talk about today, asset management. But there's no shame in being confused or not knowing. When we start reading these books and the amendments, we don't know all of them. We don't know all of it. It's a journey of continuous improvement. I intend to read the regs. I do read the regs. I check I've read them, and then I act upon the fact I don't know them. And then I go and watch one of your videos, Dave. Now, apologies for this, because this is probably the one slide that everybody can just press pause on if they're watching it on YouTube. It's the text for what management system is, because I don't want to do it just disjustice by quoting it wrong. So a management system is a way in which the organization manages interrelated parts. Yeah. So the maintenance guys, the quality guys, the audit guys, the safety guys, the project delivery guys, all of those various people who sit in their own little tribes. It's a way of trying to bring them together via objectives, business objectives. Now, these objectives can relate to a number of different topics: products, services, quality, operations, environmental performance, health and safety. So ideal example, running a railway. Energy is key. Running trains uses a lot of energy. Making sure you're not, creating any more waste than you have to, ensuring energy. So what ends up happening is you get little tribes that go off and do stuff. But it's trying to ensure that the business comes together where everybody can understand where they sit in the big picture, which we will get onto in a bit. Again, depending on the size of the business, depends on the level of complexity as well. Some organizations, smaller ones, are good gaffer. So a domestic house basher can be an asset manager just by having a clear, strong leader. They don't need to necessarily do every single thing, as long as they understand what they're doing and they're not being wasteful, and they document everything correctly and they keep good records. That may be enough for them as far as their management system. But remember, the reason why we do this is to ensure we fulfill legal obligations and meet the objectives, i.e., I don't want to be a rubbish contractor. So this is the introduction of the 6-box model, also known as the scope of asset management. And I absolutely love this, and so does the guy on the top right. Obviously, he thinks it's great. And he's right. It's my favorite GIF of all time, so apologies. This is full of GIFs. Let's get rid of him. So this, for me, when I was on the journey learning, was the 6-box model. And all it was, for me, it was great. New terms, new words, new ways of thinking, new choices to make, possibly a better understanding of things. And that's what I found with that. So Dave, where do you think, let's say you're SparkyNinja electrical contractor, where do you sit in life cycle delivery?
Well,
where do you think you sit?
Surely there's parts of a few of these really to assist with. I can see myself having worked with strategy and planning and decision making.
Yep.
In my roles. Is this a trick question? Am I in all?
No, this is just an open debate now. This is me and you chewing the fat, regardless of how many people are watching us.
For customers, I've helped look at the organisation people. I've actually helped train them. Asset making decisions, I've helped with. Strategy and planning, I've worked with. Asset information, I've worked with a number of these.
And the thing is you're kind of not wrong. Yeah. And this is the thing about asset management. It's about you defining and understanding where you sit within the bigger picture.
I've definitely done risk and review.
So, for instance, I would say if you were on the tool Sparky or you were doing inspection and testing, you sit within maintain. Okay, so part of maintenance will be the inspection and testing, of the delivery of an asset. Okay, now the output of that will go into risk and review. Okay, which then goes back into the plan, and the planners may come back and say, well, we need a strategy. How do we do this? How do we plan to take this piece of plant that Dave's gone and done some thermal imaging? He's condemned it. It's a high risk because it runs, let's say, a biscuit factory's main power supply. We need a strategy and a plan. They may come back to you as the expert who highlighted the risk. There'll be other people who help you make the decision based on cost. There'll be other people to support you, the managers. You'll then require the asset information. So what this shows is, whilst there's 6 clear areas within the life cycle of any asset management system, there's clear areas where people sit within, but also overlap and also have to communicate. You can't do life cycle delivery without understanding risk, without understanding asset information, without having decision-making tools or having a plan or having an organizational view. And that organizational view straight away, I mean, look at the top. They've got customers to worry about. If it was a railway, customers, the impact from customers, legislation. If I was, again, using a railway as an example, the Office of Rail Regulator, the DFT, Network Rail, investors, people who own the business, commercial environment, the pressures of board, making sure you're not hemorrhaging money. All of this contributes towards the bigger scope. So as an engineer or an electrician, as a manager, I'm not just thinking about that box on the wall or John Ward's box of rubbish, as we called it. That box on the wall, that's great, but there's a bigger picture behind and around that box that we need to understand so that when we can make an informed decision to do something about it, which is not to our detriment, but to our betterment.
So as a contractor, if I have a much more broader understanding on this standard, was it 55,000, wasn't it? 55,000, yeah. Right. Does that give me, or does that give more value to my client if I can if I can actually work with some of this?
Yes, without a doubt. I would kill for contractors that could come and understand where they fit in this 6-box model. Now, God bless the people at the IM, because they like a bit of colour, and there you go. So we now they've broken the 6-box model into 6 groups, which are named exactly as they were: strategy and planning, decision making, life cycle delivery, asset information, organisation and people, and risk and review. Now, within that alone, you could have one person doing every single job. So for instance, I know an asset information managers, all they do is define what information do I need, what standards is the information collected to, what systems I'm going to use as a repository, Maximo or some other system, and how do I take that data and manage it. So you want to do some work on a consumer unit on a railway station. So you need my past information, because that's a requirement of the British Standard and statutory obligation.
Yep.
You need to do the work, give me back the updated information, and I need to then change control that and manage that better. That means that when someone else goes back 3 years later, they haven't gone in, I've given them the data and they go, well, this is completely wrong. Oh yeah, Dave did something 2 years ago. Well, why wasn't that captured? Why wasn't it updated? It's a very simple management tool.
So when we have sites where we can go in as a inspector or even as a PAT tester, and we just deliver brand new asset IDs in our walk around the site, is that conclusive that these kind of strategies aren't in the full effect on that site?
In theory, there should be. I mean, if you look at life cycle delivery alone, technical standards and legislation, asset creation and acquisition, systems engineering, probably more for the bigger stuff, configuration management, maintenance delivery, reliability, asset operations, resource management, shutdowns and outage, fault and incident response, asset decommissioning and disposal. There isn't an electrical contractor in the world who doesn't do pretty much 90% of that straight away. And if they can understand and produce information that supports those other 5 groups far better, they become a more useful contractor. More importantly, they are developing a common language framework in which to talk to the clients. Instead of looking up and going, yeah, they ain't got a clue what they're doing, and then looking down and going, yes, but what do you mean it doesn't comply with the regulations? I don't really understand what the context of the detail you're telling me. I don't need to, and we'll go into that in a second, Dave, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The one thing that you probably need to know about these subject groups is there's a thing called alignment and the asset management landscape, okay, and it's globally. And one of the things that this model was designed to do was to illustrate the breadth of activities within the scope, the interrelations between the activities, the need to integrate them, the critical role for asset management to align and deliver the goals, which you could see on that last slide. If I can get, oh, there we go. How it all interrelates. It's really, really important. But moving forward, because I could spend probably 3 hours, and I can tell you now, if you ever do the training, this 6-box model, you will spend 3 to 4 days on. Just going into the detail of what systems engineering is, the V cycle, maintenance, delivery, reliability, looking at failure modes and all sorts.
They're not just words, they're actually big things.
No, and they're tasks. And whole life costing, for instance, is massive. So life cycle value realization, I may have to sit and look at the whole life cost of a fire alarm panel. So a fire alarm panel may cost me £5,000 to buy. Well, that's great. So did I make a good decision paying £5,000 for a panel? Let's say it was just a panel and I bought it, I paid someone to replace it. Okay, what do I need to do now? Well, I need to cost 2 men
to maintain it
every 3 months to go back, or monthly to do the monthly checks if I'm not going to allow my staff. So I need to work out the labor cost of attendance yearly, because that panel may be designed for 15 years. Within the 15 years, I need to understand that panel may need a software upgrade once. So I need to price for the software upgrade, allow for inflation. And before you know it, a £5,000 panel over 15 years, I'm looking at paying 170 grand. The reason I'm using that as an example is I actually did it on a railway station. So 170 grand makes me go, whew, that's a lot of money. I've now got to tell my directors, by the way, this one piece of kit, this is how much money it's going to cost. Then what you start understanding is how much the value of the assets you have is and how much it's going to cost you going forward. So you can actually plan this stuff. And that's really, really important, because the one thing about asset management, and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it again before you cannot be an asset manager if you don't know what you've got and what condition it's in. And that is part of the journey itself. You can't just click your fingers. I joined my current employer 2 years ago, and I'm still kind of, well, I know where I am now pretty much with the number of assets I have, the condition of them, which is great, but it's taken me a period of time. I now need to forecast how much money I spend. And all of that sits within this 6-box model. Let's see. Right, moving on. Asset management is not an accounting exercise. Contributes towards accounting exercise, but it's not a sole accounting exercise. It is not a project management system, even though there is such thing as CapEx delivery, works delivery to renew and replace an asset once its life cycle has expired, but it's not a sole project management system. It's not just for engineers, although there will always be an engineering tribe. And I've always said that engineers make great asset managers once they're able to divorce themselves from the detail of the regulations and see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And a great terminology that was used when I was learning was most people who work in engineering, they'll always say, oh, I've rewired this building from cradle to grave. Okay, cradle to grave, great. But the asset manager will look at the project from lust to dust. I'll leave you to figure out the difference between lust and the cradle and grave to dust, because when you go in the grave, there's still something there that has potentially an impact on you. So yeah, cradle to grave versus lust to dust. That's kind of two of the difference in mindsets. Cradle to grave gives you kind of that sort of mindset. Lust to dust, far bigger picture. You can see far more in front of you and around you. It's not a quality management system. That's what ISO 9000 is about, but it does contribute towards them. It's not just about maintenance and maintaining things. And it's not just for academic folk, although I know some really, really smart people, and I really hope they're not watching me at the moment because they'll probably be shaking their head. But there's also lots of new terminology that you're going to learn when you go on this journey to get the big picture. Some of that new terminology, whole life cost, I've just explained, whole life cost of a fire alarm panel. If I pay you, Dave, to rewire my railway station, yeah, you're going to give me a cost. Let's say it costs, let's say 300 grand to rewire a railway station. That's great. Wouldn't it be great if my contractor could come to me and say, it'll cost you 300 grand if we do this, and this will be the residual costs if we maintained it. Mm-hmm. And then it allows you to then be more picky and collaborative as to how you specify the rewire, the materials you use, etc. There's terms, total cost of ownership, asset planning. So you will have people that will collect all this data and will just forecast and plan from the reports that the guys on the shop floor, the EICRs, you can use software now even. You put it into a machine, it will read, it will review, it will tell you the risks, and it will then say to you, well, these are the highest risks from a railway. I'll use a railway because that's where I work. So if on my railway at the moment, I've got 26 stations, my asset planning is which of my railway stations is the highest priority to rewire or do interventions, which is another new term. Line of sight, really important because of the 3 words below it. So line of sight, you have to have line of sight and transparency in everything you're doing in asset management. I cannot go off and just make stuff up as I go along. I can't do that. I have to be able to justify it to the people next to me, the people working with me, and the people working above me. And the way that's done in asset management is every asset management organization will have a policy. And that policy is just normally a 1-page statement of intent. We're going to adopt ISO 55000 and be as best in class within budgetary and risk constraints. The strategy is going to be, this is how I intend to deliver the objective of complying with the ISO, and this is me identifying what I've got and understanding the work I need to do. Now, year 1 of an asset management strategy could be, I need to go out and understand what I've got and what condition it is. Year 2 can then be, well, I've gone out, I've understood, I've got high risk. Year 3 can be, I need to make decisions. I may need to do some enhanced replacement. I may need to do some investment. I may need to sweat some assets, i.e. leave it and let it run to failure because it doesn't impact.
Yeah.
I may need to be smarter as to how I subcontract stuff. And then the plan is to how you're going to deliver it. And what happens is normally every year you kind of forecast and you update the strategies and the plans, and you get a line of sight. So you don't want a strategy saying, we are not going to do anything regards to railway stations, and then produce an asset management plan that says, we are going to build new railway stations and rewire them. You have no line of sight.
No line of sight, no.
No line of sight at all. Life cycle, again, it's understanding the life cycle of an asset from basically how it's created all the way through to how it doesn't become your problem anymore. And that includes the disposal, the transfers. We need to make sure we're sustainably getting rid of products, not just shipping it in a container to Africa to pollute and contaminate with our company logos all over it, which we see so often.
The disposal of equipment is just as important as this, when you're deciding the selection.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it really is. All parts of it are important. Benchmarking, comparing you to others. So I will benchmark my railway against another railway, and it could be anything from number of faults, number of failures, age of wiring. It can be anything. CapEx and OpEx are terms that electricians probably don't hear, but you're part of every day. OpEx is the operational expenditure, how much I spend to run things, maintenance. CapEx is capital expenditure. So that's, what do I want to spend to build a new railway, to build a new bridge, to improve things, to make the passenger, because I'm not going to spend money just for the sake of it. There must be benefits. So if I spend £5 million putting in a new bridge, I'm going to put new lifts with it. Why? Because it's a passenger benefit. If I'm going to put on a data center a new main panel board, I may decide to put a static switch with a changeover contactor and a generator. Why? More resilience in power, easier to maintain, safer to maintain, more resilience and less power outages for the data that I hold critical. New terms, asset condition monitoring. You can now, and this is Netmarella actually doing it, you can now monitor the conditions of cables to the nth degree where you can predict they're going to fail. Now, that will never end up in commercial or domestic, but Netmarella are using it on their signaling cables. So that's quite exciting. Cost modeling. You're going to have to start using Excel whether you want to or not, because that's how you list out all the costs against every single year. It's really simple. It's like a schedule of activities, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. And you can start building models that show you curves. I don't think I've got any curves in this because that goes into too much detail. This is about just talking to you about this. There's also terms like failure mode effect analysis. This is where you go to your engineering tribe and you understand, why did this 2-year-old pump fail? Is it because the diameter or the pressure in the pipes before it are incorrect? Is there a bigger problem? Do you open Pandora's box by saying, I can't actually manage this amount of sewage unless I spend 20 million putting in some sort of intervention to reduce pressure on my pipework? Understanding the root cause can generate capital projects. So it doesn't become about someone's personality. It's objective facts, logic and reasoning, all documented, which drive the improvement, which I love, because people are key to it and their passions, but it's a very objective stuff. Intervention, we have to intervene constantly. If you know that there's a high risk asset and it's failed, you need to look at the rest of your assets and possibly stage a smaller intervention, which is very difficult to forecast from a financial perspective. But you can, when you're doing risk planning, assign, let's say you're a £100 million company per year, you may assign £5 million a year towards risk interventions. So that when something happens, somebody says, oh no, what can we do? Well, don't worry, we've got £5 million. That's our intervention pot. Let's react. Let's get service back up and running. Let's work the problem.
Does a strategy like that also become an asset in itself, in that there is value from that?
If you're doing it right within the context of the business and its objectives, what you'll find is the business objectives of, we will perform, we will run trains, we will make biscuits, we will generate gas, we will do sewage. If you work your way through the plans and you understand your failures, and you're doing reliability assessments, condition monitoring, you're doing curves, what you'll find is it goes back on itself. So the outputs of these failure modes and interventions will then influence the strategies and the investment models. And if you go back to the 6-box model, the risk people will also then tell the senior management, there's a problem down here in life cycle delivery. We're spending too much. Why? Because the asset information people are telling us that actually the stuff we're installing, we're having to rework twice. So very quickly moving on, an asset manager, one of the things that they do, or they try to do, and they try and do well, is help develop and shape the policy. Sometimes not always possible, because once you've got a policy in place, it just has to be reviewed. The strategies, absolutely. I'm asset manager at the moment in my job. Probably should have introduced that at the start, actually. So I'm the asset manager for building services and fire safety for Trenitalia C2C. And that's my job. So I have to write the strategy. I also have to plan how to do it. I have to deliver the plans. I have to manage risk in regards to infrastructure. I have to lead people in the form of my subcontractors. but most importantly, correlate and manage information and data. Not data from Star Trek, obviously, but data is key, because that data in the form of written and documented evidence means that I am not, I'm trying to put this in a nice way. If I moved on tomorrow, the hard work I've done still benefits the business's objectives. And that's a key. Yeah. That's key. So the key to success, if you don't know what asset you have, how the hell do you know what to manage? And I've been on that journey for 2 years. I can genuinely say, I now know what I have, what I need to manage, what I need to do to manage it, how I need to invest, and how I then have to develop the business cases, another new term, to convince the non-technical people, the non-technical managers, that this is a valid thing. Otherwise, they'll have failures, which then impact operations, which then cost them far more money. Again, it's the science of common sense, because if you don't know what to manage, then you just sit there and people go, oh, you're the asset manager. And you just go, yeah, I am an asset manager, but I don't have any data. I don't have any information. So what do you want from me? So that's one of the key journeys. Anyone who goes on an asset management journey, the first thing they'll always say is, what data do we have? What information, what knowledge? Because that's the learning. That's where the learning always starts. If you don't, it just costs you just ridiculous volumes of money, to be perfectly frank. I thought I'd do a little asset management problem. So this is a little case study, actually, of one that I've done. So 1 second. It kind of links to the line of sight stuff. So with problems, what I'm trying to do is show and evidence that the work I've done is managed and engineered and solved in a way that benefits the objectives of the organisation. So the example I have, this is a Docklands Light Railway. So this was one of the examples. We found this, okay? We found lots and lots and lots of corroded cable management, 30 years old, rotten, paint over paint over paint over paint. Now, as you can see, there's LV cables in there. That stuff runs railways, okay? That runs power supplies. That runs all sorts of stuff. You can't run a railway. You can't light a platform. You can't do anything without that sort of stuff. So one of the things that I found when this stuff started to fail was, why are we not putting in stainless steel? Why are we not putting in something that's more resilient to corrosion, you know, or non-corrosive GRP? Yes, the initial cost is higher, but the maintenance costs may be lower. The inspection cost may be lower, because the expected life of stainless or GRP is 3 times longer than standard galv. The risk of disruptive failure may be lower. Therefore, the risk to the organisation, that high-level organisation, from a performance, health and safety and environmental perspective, may be lower. I'm ripping out less, I'm recycling less, I'm using less. My safety of my staff, I mean, look at the state of that box. The lid was off, it was single cores floating around. It's awful, absolutely awful. Okay, so it's all lower. By doing the job right, you improve other management things. Now, the total life cycle cost, therefore, may be lower, because if I don't use GRP or stainless, I'm going to have to do more interventions. I'm going to have to define more complex safe systems of work, do more outages. Those costs are something that I don't really want to forecast or plan for. I just want to do it once and do it right, and keep my long-term whole life cost as low as possible.
How could an electrical contractor foresee the likelihood of this? Obviously, I mean, your distance from the sea is quite close for your railway, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the Docklands is Docklands, yeah. It's tidal.
Right.
My railway C2C is their next door neighbour, because I literally went next door, and we have a similar problem, which again, it's tidal, but this is something I dealt with about 5 years ago now, and it literally came down to the fact of the non-technical not knowing that they didn't know, and that's what they required the engineering tribe to come in. But it was a brand new railway. Well, it's brand new, it's 30 years old. So these assets had gone well beyond their life, beyond, because as you'll see in the next pictures, there you go. I mean, they turned to dust, literally. The rust had turned to dust. And they were painting over rust. As you can see from the bottom picture there, they were literally painting over rust.
Or on the cables themselves.
Yes, or on the cables themselves. So again, just doing the work, leveling up, go to the wiring regulations, regulation 13251, fundamental principle, the design shall take into account environmental conditions. Do you think that cable management did? No. Right. So again, repeated fundamental principles. Choice, wiring, method of installation should consider nature of location, nature of support, accessibility of persons, electromagnetic stresses, other external influences. Do you think that did? No. Again, fundamental principles. And this is what really frustrated me. 1333, electrical equipment should be selected so as to withstand safety, stresses, and environmental conditions. 3 times in fundamental principles, it says, understand environmental conditions, select and act accordingly. You go to Appendix 5, external influences. AF2 environment is defined as atmospheric and corrosive, which you could easily say, a marina, tidal, is very much corrosive, and identifies the need to undertake a test for salt mist substances. Now, I've done railway stations where what we've done is we've actually tested the paint, and the paint has come back highly contaminated with salt, and we've ended up stripping back and putting on a new paintwork system. And this is the journey we went on. So in BSEN 60068-2-11, there is a neutral salt spray test. Now, most people know these from luminaires. So luminaires are tested, pressure tested, heat, cold, rain, salt, etc., to say these are IP rated and they're also anti-corrosive. But one of the things that's mentioned in that standard very naughtily is BSEN 12944, paints and varnishes corrosion protection of steel structures. Now, there's a whole suite of these, by the way, and it defines the environments for various methods of protection systems for steelwork. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, Dave, because this is one of the only standards that defines like environmental conditions. I've done loads and loads of research on this, and what I found was this. It gives C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, low and medium, and it defines the environmental conditions in relation to corrosion. Now, C1, very low, heated buildings, offices, shops, schools, fine, no problem. C2, low, atmosphere, rural regions, buildings which are not heated, condensation, sports source, fine, no problem there. It's all internal stuff. C3, medium, rural, urban areas, medium sulfur dioxide, acid, alkaline, salt pollution. Okay.
Foodstuff,
laundries, breweries, somewhere where the air is contaminated, where deposits can form on cable management systems. So this is engineering logic now to justify the asset management decision.
I've seen that. I've got loads of photos where I've seen in food production product contaminating wiring systems. I think I've shown you pictures of some before where, food product gets onto wiring systems and it starts to corrode and actually chew on.
Indeed. So you then go into C4, high chemical plants, swimming pools, ship repair yards, marinas. Now, if anyone's been on the DLR, all you do is go around marinas, chemical plants, factories that produce foodstuffs and all sorts. It's a roller coaster through East London. C5, very high industrial areas of high humidity, aggressive atmospheres, buildings that are almost constant condensation, high contamination. Probably not actually, I don't think it is that. But C5M, which is very high, marine grade, inshore areas and offshore, high salinity, buildings of almost constant condensation and high contamination. A railway station, naturally, Chalkwell is literally on a sea wall. So unless you've got a super thick galvanized coating, realistically, you've got the wrong type of containment. And this is exactly what we found here. This is just standard hot dip galv. It will never last. The paints have actually formed a barrier, but slowly but surely, that's actually under a staircase. The salt mist deposits, rain, all of that washes in, and all it's doing is just corroding and breaking down the metals to the point where it actually has these pictures where the containment's completely gone. Now, I've gone from a wiring regulations and some other BS standards to, am I in breach? Because that's all a non-technical manager will, they don't care what you put in. What they care about is, are we in breach of any legal obligation?
The conclusion.
The conclusion, not the journey. I've just shown you the journey I went on in the DLR. So my argument in the DLR was Regulation 6, adverse or hazardous environments. Electrical equipment may be foreseeably exposed to mechanical damage. Well, we solved that by putting in metal boxing containment, placing it out of reach. But the effects of the weather, natural hazards, temperature or pressure, the effects of wet, dirty, dusty, or corrosive conditions, salt mist deposits, they are absolutely key. And this is why I've always said, and on my railway, I'll be open, anything outside is stainless steel 316 or GRP. Anything inside standard galv, no problem. And that's the minimum acceptable criteria for giving me a better asset life. I know when I go around, if you walk around some of my stations, you'll see stainless steel conduits. I know I don't have to do an intervention in 10, 15 years. It will still sit there. I won't have corroded saddles, stuff falling off.
And as you've just directed there, I mean, this history or this work has resulted in you developing a strict rules procedure or policy procedure for work on your railway.
Yes.
You know, so you've learned, and then you've got value in that because you can then choose how to work in the future.
But just remember, this isn't just. I mean, if you go on to Thames Water or sewage or foul or effluent plants, this will be the exact same. You'll walk into rooms, and I tell you now, I'm scared. If I ever walked onto a Thames Water or another site and I didn't see stainless, I'd immediately go as an asset manager. I haven't got the money for all this. This is going to cost me money in 20 years that I don't have. And that's the trouble. Asset management falls apart if you're not doing the job properly, or you're at least identifying the risks of not doing the job properly. So we're going to move on to tribes. Not these tribes, but tribes are really important because tribes are about personalities. Tribes also represent conflicts. And again, apologies for the blurred zooming in there. This is kind of just a snippet of the big picture. And if you can see or read that, it says the guy in the collective decision making is going, there's so much we don't know. There's a group of people at a table above them. Compliance is a first step. There's lots of people in that having their own little separate meetings, own little tribes. And when you look at one section in a narrow view, you don't get the big picture. Now, in my career, developing and emerging and acknowledging my own weaknesses and my own need to upskill, some of the questions I've had have almost dumbfounded me. So I've put them on the screen here now, and this is really simple. How many contractors always say my client isn't technical? 99%. Clients are not technical. I'm always told I'm the exemption because I'm technical and I know the regs better than most of my contractors, but it's very hard balancing that. The client doesn't need to be technical. They need to understand the common language framework. And if the contractor understands the common language framework, all of a sudden, you don't have to have the technical decisions. You talk about risk, whole life cost, resilience, operational impacts. Then the client gets you. And that's what makes some contractors stand out from the rest. Contractors and people understanding their contribution to whole life value, doing the job right, doing it once. I have met, and I'm going to say this on this podcast, I have met contractors, not on my current job, 10 plus years ago, contractors who did a bodge job and who have said, don't worry, it's more work for us. In fact, there's a picture of it later on. The contractor will be NIC or ECA registered. I've met asset managers who've said that. Is that enough? One of my colleagues said to me, is that good? And I was like, does it really actually mean anything in context of our common language framework? But it does fall under assurance. Do you go to Joe Bloggs self-employed, or do you go to Joe Bloggs who's had some form of checking? It may not be to the agreed. We could do we do podcasts on the state of the electrical industry and how it needs to level up and improve, but something has got to be better than nothing. And so, yes, use a registered contractor, but it doesn't have to be with one. It can be with any of them, as long as the process behind the checking is the same. How or who does what? I know people that don't understand what the contractors do. I know contractors don't understand what the client do. I had one colleague come to me and say it's confusing, lots of badges. What about service, quality, cost, benefits? Again, it's a person I worked with had a conversation with a contractor. It was an electrical one. And they came to me and they said, oh, they've got all these badges and all their paperwork, but they don't understand about cost, benefits. They just go blank. They can't speak my language. And this is the thing, there is genuinely a disparity between the two. But one of the comments that was said to me was, my electrical contractor provides me data and they do maintenance and they run an asset management system. Is that enough? If I employed you, Dave, to do my maintenance, what data would you give me? What O&M information do you think I would need to satisfy that 6-box model, which we'll come back on? I also got asked once what infrastructure was. I did. I genuinely. So it's a fun time. It's not boring. Let's put it like this. Asset management is never boring. And if it is boring, you're doing something wrong.
I'm going to bring a question up as you.
Oh, okay, go on.
Because Gary says, how can a contractor demonstrate being more asset management friendly from an initial meeting with a client?
Good question. How can you be more friendly? I would suggest you start to develop and understand the language, which we'll go through in a bit, and where you fit and how you fit. And what I found is, let's be perfectly frank. When the 18th edition came out, it kind of tailored our behaviours. Now, a lot of Sparks will immediately go, when I've changed consumer unit, I'm going to put in surge protection. Some of them will know why. Some of them won't know. It's the exact same when contributing towards a client who's an asset manager. If you understand the language or the intent or the reasoning behind, I mean, how many people when they're tendering work say to their client, do you have any asset management plans or strategies I can review?
I know. That's a question very few would have had asked of them. Many of them would be very impressed with that question.
They would be massively impressed. If my contractor turned around and said that to me, I'd fall off my chair and go, what? In all fairness, actually, I'm quite lucky in respects of my contractor that I'm working with now knows he is contributing to the writing of the strategy. But more importantly, because I don't do this, you work for me, you work with me.
Yep.
The approval of my strategy, my contractor will approve it as well. Because my contractor needs to understand what he now has to deliver.
Well, he's got to perform, hasn't he? He's got to
deliver
your strategy.
If I turn around and say, I want 22 stations rewired in 12 months, that's my strategy. I give that to my contractor. My contractor's going to go, I can't do that. I ain't got the resources. And then immediately I have conflict because I've told my board and my board think it's achievable because I've not told the risk tribe that it's not achievable. Do you know what I mean? And so, good question. We'll come back because hopefully we'll get this answered throughout. But come back to me in a few slides' time, David, if that's okay.
Right, yeah.
But one of the key things to, again, any asset management, it's not just knowing what you've got and what state it's in. It's data. Data, obviously, huge character in Star Trek Next Generation, but the other data, there is a huge need to acquire data. In most asset management businesses, we've got to get asset information. We've got to get asset data. We've got to keep it somehow. Don't know how. We've got to know what we want and how we want it. We've got to know how to assess it and we've got to understand it. And there you can get asset information debates. I know a certain chap who is a guru on this. And I remember having a row with him as I want every cable labeled. I want this labeled. I want that labeled. I want that labeled. And he went, that's fantastic. That's great. You want everything labeled to the nth degree? And I went, yep. And he said, so when you create an asset register of all your cables and all your equipment, I went, yep. And he went, and you remove that one cable? And I went, yep. And he went, does it change everything else? And I was like, oh, yeah. And he went, so you now got to go and relabel everything because you've changed something. And I went, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Is there such a thing as over-labeling? Yes. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of sensible...
There will be. If you don't really understand the purpose of it, then you just label it for the sake of it.
Yes.
It's trying to find that happy medium because, again, I've gone to many clients and I'll ask for data and they'll have information and they've never read their own data.
Well, there's two types of labeling as well. So for me, the first type of labeling is the asset information. So the data that the asset manager uses, but then there's also the useful information that the electrician, the engineer, the guy doing the work needs to use that the asset manager sees as superfluous. And they will do until they have a harmonized understanding. But what ends up happening is the minute you cry wolf and say, data, I need data, you end up with these project managers turning up out of nowhere. And the project manager just sit there going, there's a project there, great. We'll go and get loads of data. We'll label everything up. We'll create infinite amount of drawings. We won't really tell you we won't finish it. We won't really tell you how exactly it all works, but we'll get you loads and loads of information. And then what happens is the overall business lead or the asset director will just sit there going, great. One guy's calling for data. The other guys are just saying, yeah, fine. It just becomes three tribes all agreeing, but none of them harmonizing because none of them are documenting, defining the need, the want, the good, the reason, the rhyme, and the long-term impact or benefit of why they want that data. And that's the trouble. And that's why asset information, trying to stitch these relevant departments to communicate, stitch them together properly so that we don't have that. And then when you do, you create the big picture in any business. And this is a journey that many, many organizations have been going on. So Dave, in the YouTube video comments, in the comments, in the YouTube information, what we'll need to do is put a link to this, because this is actually a video. Now, we're not going to play it, but this video was created by the Institute of Asset Management, which is why we're not going to play it, because I don't know copyright, but it is on YouTube. It's a 9-minute video, and every single time I have showed this video in a team meeting, the room has been dumbfounded silence. And at the end of it, I've said one thing: can everybody recognize themselves somewhere in that big picture? And everybody nods, including the contractors, the maintenance guys who were saying, we've been telling you for years. And this is one of the first ever times I've ever seen an organization, no matter who they are, what badge they've got, or what title they are, or size, you can genuinely see why businesses fail when you watch that video. And that's great, because then that inspires you to want to use a common language framework to start developing and growing your business to make you better a service provider. But more importantly, don't forget, electrical contractors don't have to be knowledgeable of this for their clients. You can be your own asset manager for your business. There are parts of this you can adapt and adopt. You don't have to necessarily go for full registration, but find the best parts of it and adopt it to improve your business. You know, you're probably ISO 9001 of a size where you are to do these bigger pieces of work. But yeah, so please watch the video after this. It is awesome. Honestly, I've used it a number of times. I couldn't say it any better. I really couldn't. So please, as part of further reading, watching, viewing, please watch this. The link will be below. And when you're finished, please go on and watch it. Right, let's get back to the 6-box model. So we know we have to do strategy and planning. We have to have a policy, line of sight with strategies, demand analysis. You know, we have a national grid. How much power am I going to have? Is there enough? Do I need to commission a project? Do I need to put a plan together to commission that project? Do I need to plan the works? How do I make the decision making? Am I earning enough money from energy costs, for instance, for Group 2 to make a decision to be able to afford to do the work? Is there any operations and maintenance decisions where I can free up money? Am I overly maintaining, or can I do risk-based maintenance? Can I run an asset to failure?
Failure, yeah.
These are all options. It sounds mad, because first time I was told, I was like, what? Don't be stupid. You can do it. You genuinely can do it. Life cycle value realization. That's when you really start to go, I don't need that fire alarm panel. Not 170 grand. I don't. Let me actually look at what I'm protecting. And by the way, that fire alarm panel was one room, a brick shed with a panel, a detector, and a call point. 170 grand over 15 years. So that's why asset management delivers some life cycle value realization. Resourcing strategy. You can't deliver jack. You can't do anything unless you actually have a plan to resource this, bring in suppliers, contractors, and your shutdowns. You know, if it's a data center, critical, absolutely critical. Life cycle delivery. I think everyone in construction lives and breathes life cycle delivery. What I want people to do from this is to expand, looking out at the other 5 boxes. Asset information. How many projects, when they finish, they have a 10% on the project where it's about finishing the O&M manuals? How many people get given an asset register template? How many people turn around and say, what format would you like the O&M in? How many people give catalogs? Catalogs. Do you know how many MK catalogs I've had in my career? I hate MK catalogs. I don't want MK catalogs. What I want is the data sheet. I don't want the catalog. I want the data sheet, because every component in it has a data sheet. That's information I want. Organization and people. Procurement, the bane of electrical contracting. Cheap is best. Cheap is best. However, there are 5 other departments that can tell them, no, cheap isn't best. The risk management of this organization says if you procure cheap, we pay twice. And life cycle delivery is very expensive. So don't do it. Asset management leadership. If you do not have, like with a safety culture, if you do not have the right personality, passion driving this, it can be quite hard. It's like pushing a boulder uphill. You need to have the right organizational structure, not sit in a silo, the right culture, and the right competence management, which we'll get onto in a sec. I'll give you a little sneak peek of that. And then risk, audit, value, stakeholders, third parties, all that good stuff. But for contractors, Dave, where do you think a contractor would sit in on that?
Well, those there.
Yeah, well, what do you think? Just on that one, we're going to go through, because contractors may not sit in all of them. So I've picked 3 that a contractor may sit in?
Well,
how do you think a contractor can influence them? Or do you think a contractor can influence them?
they can influence, well, the operation maintenance decision making, surely.
What about capital investment decision making? I'll show you something in a
Would
minute.
that not be in reflection of what they would say then?
The output of the contractor's work, when you've gone round and done a survey, and I say to you, please can you put me, I don't know, let's say 12 new sub panels,
right?
And I get 5 contractors to do me a quote. One of them contractors will turn around and go, excuse me, but the main panel connected is corroded and its life expired and it's knackered. And if you connect 120 mil 5 core armors, you could end up with a serious safety incident, or you're just going to get premature failure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that then could change the way we make our decisions about how we capitally invest. They will then go to the risk people and say, why hasn't this been highlighted? How do we improve? And then you could actually drive a scope change to make the work better, to make it more profitable. So doing the job properly should, in theory, make it profitable. And I'm going to say this from personal experience. I have never, in any role I've ever had, lost money, ever. I've always generated money from doing it properly and doing the work and having the debate, the argument, the fight, whatever you want. Operation maintenance, absolutely, Dave, totally agree. Yes, absolutely, we do contribute towards that in what we do. Life cycle value realization, yes. The more people understand this, the better. Alternative offerings is probably what we know it as. I want a fire alarm panel. Let's say it's a £12,000 fire alarm panel. You can offer me one that does all of the same benefits for 6. Wow. Cheaper to maintain because I can do it remotely. I can have digital access to it. You can give me a new way of thinking, a bigger way, which gives me a value realization I didn't know I had.
It's a bit like you've got those power tags on the Schneider. You know, a contractor could give you an introduction to a new technology, which would then change how you actually collect information.
So, and I probably should have put a picture in. So I have a consumer unit on my railway at the moment, which has these little tags on each circuit breaker. There's a couple of things that it's taught me about life cycle value, and that is I have too many circuits. I'm using so little energy, and I have too many circuits. I can, given the evidence I now have, reduce the number of circuits by half, consume the same energy, but the amount of infrastructure I've paid for and the amount of infrastructure I have to maintain is reduced.
Yeah, and potentially you can actually then, reuse some of your existing wiring system infrastructure by consolidating some of your existing system.
So you guys, yes, the guy pointing at you guys have the ability to influence shutdown and outage strategy. Who else is going to be better at it than you guys? You know, we should know our safe systems of work. We should know how to plan. We should understand the infrastructure we're working on because we're supposed to be competent. So straight away, of those 5, there's 4 we contribute to. So it's not that hard. It's just understanding and realizing that framework, that language framework is out there.
It's a language, isn't it?
It's a language. It's chalk and cheese, but at the end of the day, they're actually very similar to a certain extent. Life cycle delivery. Let's look at technical standards. Yes, we contribute. I mean, most contractors who, I think it's the ECA guys, as part of the membership, they're able to talk to the bigger part of the ECA and actually influence the wiring regs and speak to the committees and do all that good stuff. Asset creation and acquisition. Some clients will turn around and go, or some project managers will go, I've been told I've got to do this by the asset team. Can you help me? So you may then see an opportunity to say, well, okay, so you want me not only to price to do the work, but price to develop the work. So to develop the scope. You know, if you look at Bank Station is a perfect example, and they have a early engagement contract where the builder engaged right at the concept of what they wanted to do and went through the life cycle, which for like £1 billion project, I think now at the start of the project, they were expecting it to be $1 billion. And I think it's now only 600 million. So they can see a life cycle value there because they've gone on that journey together, succeed together or fail together. Maintenance delivery, shutdown outage management again, absolutely. Asset decommissioning and disposal, all parts that an electrical contractor should be able to get. They should get it and it should get them and they should be really good at it. And that's what a client wants. A client wants a contractor who gets it and can just do it and be really good at it. Last one, risk and review. Again, risk assessment and risk management, the task, the design, when we're doing the design, or we're employing subcontractors, or we're sitting in a design review meeting, contingency planning, resilience. So we contribute towards that, because Dave, you could turn around and I could say to you, I need you, Dave, to do an inspection and test on some equipment and inform me on a report. The first thing that will come back on a report of, you've got a panel which is running life safety equipment with only one power supply. Mm-hmm. And under the standard, there should be a backup supply. Oh, and by the way, here's a quote, and here's all of the clauses from the standards to show you it's objective. Well, there's a very high chance, one, I'm going to love you, and two, I'm going to give you the work. Mm. Or at least early engage you and pay you to help me deliver a scope to do the work to bring me back into compliance and give my equipment that resilience. Sustainable development, that's again the environmental. What do you do? How do you source your materials? Carbon footprints, asset performance, asset management system. We haven't really spoke about that because it's a course in itself, and I'll show you where to go. But they all contribute. Everybody contribute, and it's you who contribute with your behaviours and your willingness to learn and gain knowledge and help your clients better. Some clients, I know what you're saying because I can hear them talking to me. Some clients just don't deserve helping. Some of them need a mindset shift. There is the challenge of dealing with the project managers or the asset managers. So the first inquiry you need to make is this an asset management business, or are they just project managers?
Yeah.
Some asset management organizations will instigate projects where you're building skyscrapers, and most of the people on that won't even know they're doing an asset management task. We're going to go into another task now, a bit of a sample. So this is an electrical asset condition category criteria that I wrote for my railway. And that way it was, because I'm quite passionate, quite emotional, rather than people seeing this mad, grey, bearded lunatic, here's some assessment categories, which we wrote out it was for the DLR actually. And it gave us Cat A, Cat B, Cat C, Cat D, and F1 and F2. F1 are assets that fail. They require additional protective measures. So that could be a fire watchman, because, you know, stuff could be that bad. Or assets that have failed to meet required duty, withdraw. So get rid of it, remove it straight away, immediate interventions. So I thought these are great categories for the non-technical people, but I need to map that to the competence that my supply chain has. So in this column here, if you can see my cursor, so the first column on the ones on the right is EICR codes. If you go to the bottom, F2, assets that fail to meet duty, withdraw. C1, immediately dangerous. I can see it, I can touch it, it will kill me now. So that maps to C1. C2 would be assets that need additional measures, potentially. And I put C3 as an asset that requires an immediate replacement or an overhaul, or may have minor wear and tear. And if you see through the actual, the criteria, the inspection criteria, you could have this on a clipboard. So a criteria D, asset has minor wear and tear, not affecting safety operation, labels, markings. These are all C3 stuff that we do. Mm. So let me give you an example. Let's do one now. So there we go. So that's a switch room. That's an actual switch room on London Underground, funnily enough. That is gone before anybody panics. But it's a great example of a switch room that has served its time, life expired, or has it been prematurely failed or corroded by external influences. You can see there's obviously some sort of water ingress, there's corrosive efflorescence coming in through the wall. But if you were doing an EICR on that, Dave, or anyone watching, what would you code that as? It'd be interesting to know if anyone wants to. No, if they haven't fallen asleep, type in their keyboard.
Yeah. I mean, there's clearly a issue with regards to the external influence, but there's no evidence from this image that it's doing any deleterious harm to the electrical system inside these enclosures. So I'd have to look at it a bit further to see if there's any further damage, but it's a C3 initially.
Okay. So I agree with you.
Go for that. Right.
But it was a C3 and an FI. Because I'll put my asset management hat on. First of all is, that don't look good. Looks like it needs to be improved, but I need to investigate how much that needs to be improved. I may not have a budget for that quite yet. So how do I, as the inspector, take that back to the non-technical client? So let's go back to our spreadsheet. So we go down to the bottom, and at the bottom, we've clearly mapped out in a category E. I'll read it out. It says, I love that. Fix the roof from Robert Preston is just a genius. Category E, thanks, Rob. Requires immediate replacement or major overhaul. Well, that definitely does. Asset does not meet the requirement of operation. Well, if anything, it could be hazardous while being operated. We don't know. Henceforth, for further investigation. Asset is in an unacceptable condition and to be removed from use. Yes. Possibly replaced immediately. Well, in time. System and components are obsolete. Absolutely. It's the old English electric gear. Safety of operations could be compromised. Manufacturer recall may be in place. So these are sense checks. It was a C3. We totally agree. There was some FI needed to be done. But from a statutory regulation, because that's what the non-technical believe, I would then put the proposal using engineering reasoning and logic that we are potentially in breach of Regulation 4, safe systems of work. We are potentially in breach of Regulation 5, the strength capability of electrical equipment may have been compromised, but also Regulation 6, the adverse or hazardous environments has caused detriment to the installation. So would I say it's a legal breach? In my judgment as a professional engineer, yes, we potentially are in breach. So that then makes that asset a high risk, which then we then plan to fail. And if you see the risk scoring, high, medium, and low. So any manager or risk manager or health and safety professional can read that in a common language.
See, I really like this because it, you know.
Well, thank you. It took me ages.
Because we go around going C1, C2, C3, and we kind of dilly and dally over these stupid 3 codes. But what you've done is you've taken a C3, which a lot of people just walk away from, add to a pile, but you've then gone across to the AWR, and you've actually then translated it to the end client, who actually, this is the information they need to know about their potential breaches with statutory requirements. And you've then given them your engineering judgment on these 4 regulations, and you've pushed through. Now, that's a great, I mean, to me, that really enhances a simple EICR kind of work. Yeah, and you've given them this risk scoring as well.
Excuse me. This is where we are failing as an industry. So for me, working from the regulations, this is me as Paul, the electrician, working from the regulations into the law, closing that gap. But more importantly, by doing that and doing a dutiful job, can you imagine if I said that to a health and safety director and a managing director of a business?
Yeah, well,
straight away.
That C3 would not go on the pile and be forgotten like all other C3s.
Exactly.
If you've got that on there.
I've put it into the context of the potential breach. The health and safety man will see the photo, objective evidence, and go, yeah, we need to plan. Let's, in the meantime, keep people away, maybe not maintain it, but we need to do a plan to replace and upgrade. And what it means is we're controlling. We have control measures for people, and we know the risk, which means we're doing asset management, which means most Sparks, rather than just C3ing and it going on someone's desk, a little bit more work, you're creating more work for you or your employer. And this is why I genuinely believe electrical contractors, if they understood the language and maybe did this, I should probably make this available to folk. I mean, anyone who wants this PowerPoint, you can have the PowerPoint, but this, if you email me, you can have a copy of it, because this is my brain on a page, and I've used it, and I can tell you now it works, because the statisticians and the health and safety people used the columns on the right, like the 3 columns: regulation breach, legal breach, risk level. They didn't care about the EICR code, but what they did do is they learnt about the EICR code, and then all of a sudden they were thinking electrical installation coding, risk, I want to know. Improve the communication. Right. So moving forward, because we're getting on a bit. Very briefly, this is what good asset management looks like. So this is what I said earlier on. You've got to know what your infrastructure is, know what you're managing. This is Transport for London. This is probably about 4 or 5 years old now. But what this is it's a very high level pictorial guide. We've got 8,500 buses, 12,500 shelters, 120 stations, 600 underground trains. This is knowing what you've got. If you know what you've got, you can manage it. You know, 2,500 kilometers of highways, number of lifts, number of escalators, structures, bridges, embankments, drains, fiber optics, gullies, CCTV cameras. You know, there's 1,000 CCTV cameras on the DLR because it's an unmanned railway. 996 on the underground. These are obviously old dates, but it kind of shows you what gets measured gets managed. And that's really, really key. And this is London Underground have done and TfL have done they're a great success story for early adoption and understanding, because you imagine the infrastructure of this country, they've got it down to a T.
Well, they've learned lessons and worked on those, haven't they?
Well, and this is the thing. If you look at some of the pictorial guides you'll see in the anatomy, asset management is a coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from those assets. If you know what you've got, you can see where the value is. But you have to have a system that allows interacting elements to establish policies, objectives, and also understand what your portfolio is. What physical things do you have to spend the cash on, maintaining? And that gives you that overall management of the organization. Now, a lot of people are thinking, well, how good does a business need to be at this? So this is a great tool that it's a self-assessment tool. For me, I started off 0%. I was innocent. I was learning. I would now say I am around 30%. That's my genuine assessment. I'm 30 to 35%. And what I have found in my journey of asset management is organizations seem to be like an elastic band going from 15 to 45%. So they get up there and then a corporate business objective changes and they go back. Yeah. So the coronavirus is a perfect example of how businesses are focusing on asset management. Other things have taken priority. Back you go to developing. You don't lose the knowledge, but the corporate objectives have changed. So you go back to just applying. Some organizations, National Grid, Water, they're well into the effective and excellence, the early adopters. Once you go past excellent, you're outside of the scope of the ISO. You are effectively almost writing your own standard. And that's one of the key things. You've got to be able to assess yourself and also as a business, assess the business. Now, just on the C word, because I know me and you love it, Dave, the IEM have actually published a competency framework, which I'm doing a little bit of work with them on. There are 7 competencies that we have to demonstrate using a common language framework: policy development, strategy, management planning, implement the plans, capability development, risk management, performance, asset management, knowledge. That is how they are the competencies that the IEM believe you can then optimize the delivery and performance of assets. So you can see we've gone from talking the technical day to day into now the management speak. But in actual fact, when you look into those, a lot of it is just about us leveling up a little bit and getting that common language framework so that we can.
Again, it's a language. I mean, I try to push myself above and beyond when I get good clients, allow me that time, allow me the ability to even push harder. I end up doing a lot of this kind of thing, but it's just a different language. It's a case of actually,
So it just also on that, competence is defined in this British Standard, and it says the ability to apply knowledge and skills to achieve intended results. Okay, I quite like that one. It's very succinct. It's not about you can be a good Sparks. This is the ability to apply the knowledge and skills you have to achieve the intended results.
I mean, the flip of that, I mean, the intended results for an electrical person is to prevent danger relative to the nature of their work.
Indeed.
And so that's it. Let's add that to the end of that same sentence.
Yeah, it's quite a good one. So there's a lot in asset management, and that's kind of the thing. So there's a lot people need to be going away and watching. The big picture is one of them. Downloading the competency framework, which is free to download. The anatomy. This is kind of the shock horror of the big picture of all the things we were talking about today. So you can see here the competency model, the conceptual model, the 6-box model here. You've then got the competency framework, which links to it. I strongly recommend people go away and do some additional training. I mean, this is just a familiarization introduction. There are some various levels of qualifications. I'm very fortunate. I managed to get the certificate and the diploma. There's your 39 steps. It's your subject matter. You then have your own assessment methodology we've just done, and also the knowledge center. So there's something called subject-specific guidelines, subject-specific guidance, and case studies and best practice and other books and global information standards. But more importantly, what this does is it helps you put, do you remember I said to you earlier on, the jigsaw? So this is my jigsaw, okay? This is how my jigsaw came together. So I looked at the anatomy, I looked at the standard, I looked at the competency framework, I looked at the big picture, I did the certificate, I did the diploma, I was able to assess myself openly and honestly. I'm applying and embedding. I'm happy to do that. In 10 years' time, I'll be integrating and optimizing. I looked at the subject-specific guidance notes, which are down here in the corner. So there is actual case studies of how to develop policies, plans, data management. You know, don't do too much, don't do too little. There's a bigger global landscape for around the globe because it's becoming a global common language. Lastly, we'll do another quick assessment. What do you think? This is rubbish. So this is the lighting installation where the contractor actually said to me, I said to him, this is rubbish. And his words to me was, yeah, but we'll get paid to do it again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, no, he was gone. He was gone pretty quick. But what you've got for those who may not be technical, so that's an IP rated light outside. You've then got a flange. This is after the modifications. So before this, there was a standard coupler and then just cables. Now, I called that light the gutter because all that would happen is it would rain. That's non-IP rated cable management. It would go in there, down the hole, and fill up the light, and the light would fail. So I've got premature operational failure. To fix it, they put a flange coupler to try and weatherproof the entry, a flange coupler to lift the cables off, some silicone sealant, and then some cable ties to keep the cables out of the water that was pooling.
Awesome.
That's a bodge. It's most certainly a C3 and an FI, but more importantly, it's a cost of rework, which is incredibly frustrating because you don't forecast to pay to do something twice. And it's very difficult, especially when you're in a job, to say, do you remember that job I did a year ago? Yeah, I need more money to go back and fix it. And this is where the bad contractors don't get asked to do work back. So this is kind of one of the challenges, one of the last things I want people to consider on. So this is a standard asset condition intervention table that asset managers use. So you have the condition, you know, from in conception all the way through its life, and then the timeline here. And across time, the condition will naturally degrade till you get to this intervention period. So at some point, you will map the optimum condition when it's first installed. Over a bit of time, you know, it will still within its standard operating condition. You'll get to a point where there'll be a minimum acceptable condition, and then there'll be a failed state. So as an electrician or as an electrical asset manager, I can do this. C3, once it gets below standard operating condition, I can import my code. So once it goes below standard operating condition, it may require improvement. Yeah. Okay, good. Early warning for me.
Well, that's the point. It is a warning because once you're past this minimum acceptable condition, you're going into the point of potential danger, aren't you?
Yep.
C2.
So your C2 comes at your minimum acceptable condition because once it goes past that, I need to then start thinking about doing intervention. And of course, my failed state is potentially a C1. So straight away, you can see the electrical industry can easily map and transpose what they do into asset management world. And if anything, I find that transposing this helps me understand the context and the language of asset management better from my electrical background. But more importantly, I can teach my colleagues and my peers in asset management the context of this smaller detailed stuff if it's very relevant at a time. One thing that is, I'm going to say this out loud, very challenging for me is I don't actually really know what, if I wasn't an electrician, I wouldn't really know what these people do other than a logo on a book or a badge somewhere in an audit. The contribution towards asset management, every single one of these contribute in some way. I think SparkSafe, I mean, I use SparkSafe anyway, that contributes towards my safety management, professional registration, professionally chartered engineers, NIC, my contractor organisations, JIB, individual, apparently. And
they give you assurance. We mentioned that earlier on.
Yes, some form of assurance. For the non-technical, they may do. But I've had people come up to me, and this is why this slide's here, and say, what are all these logos and what do they do? Because why are the electrics all still... Why are we having to do reworks? Why is it in a bad state?
I work with companies, and their contractual procedures is that they'll have to have JIB or something. And I'll go, okay, well, how have you then concluded that's going to give you something? And they don't really.
So let me give you the big picture of the electrical industry before we finish off. So imagine a globe, a nice big planet that's made of water, and that's kind of the asset manager's view of what they're managing. Okay, and you get some beautiful scenery, and it's lovely ocean planet, and the world's lovely, and you have all these people on the planet doing all these wonderful things, and then these trade organizations, these trade bodies, this is how I see them. They are a drop in the ocean of a planet made of water. That's how insignificant they are to asset management. Now that needs to change, because this is why the pigeon analogy, The management is seen as crapping down and people looking up. This is why, because the industry bodies responsible for this body of knowledge, we need to start mapping to this common language framework to help improve contractors' ability to do a better job for their clients, to be more resilient, to make more money, to improve the infrastructure of the UK. I don't see it. All at the moment, all I see them is doing this. Too much to do. Let's do EV. Let's do government carbon targets. Do this. It's done by default. It's far bigger picture thinking. And yeah, so that's kind of how I see it. Again, this is kind of just that setup again. I just wanted to reiterate, there's a journey you need to go on. Other than that, really, just to remind everybody that asset management, again, is a coordinated activity. You can't do it alone, of an organization. It's not just you, it's the business, to realize value from its assets. And as you can see, there's that global planet right in the back there. There's lots and lots of things to look out on. And before we get into questions, a couple of bits. The Institute of Asset Management, this is not endorsed by them or supported by them. This is just me doing it as an individual member. But if you want information, downloads and membership, go onto their website and training. I'm giving a massive shout out to the Asset Management Academy because they taught me, they put up with me, and they're a really cool group of people. And other than that, great. That's it. Questions?
I'll ask a quick question. How did you find that training?
Hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How long was it?
So the certificate was 5 days, and the diploma was 5 days as well. Actually, no. The diploma was 2 sets of 3 days, actually.
Did you have to have case studies to use?
Yeah, well, you had to. So in the certificate, it's about understanding the context of everything. So your brain has to be a sponge. You then have to go away into your work and sow the seeds and grow the knowledge and apply and adapt and look how the context of what you're doing fits with the context of the intent of the standard. When you do the diploma, you're given a mock scenario, which I loved, of a town and like a bus company. And you have basically been thrown in the deep end. And this is the case study we were given. Like your 2400 design project.
Yeah.
You now apply it at a higher level. So you're given all the statistics. That's all you're given, all the information. And you have to then work with yourself and others to pay your own salary, improve the business, make them more efficient, and put them on that asset management journey. And it's so hard, but it made you realize that teamwork and working with others, validating your own knowledge, listening to other people's opinions was really good. I mean, I was obviously the engineering maintenance tribe guy, but working respectfully and collaboratively with other people who weren't technical, I found that so valuable for me. So this is why when I go to work, I don't care what color you are, what religion, who or what you are. It doesn't matter. If you're respectful and you have a view and an opinion, it's all good. So yeah, it's improved the way I think quite a lot.
Obviously, it's non-electrical. And
yes, it is.
When electricians go on non-electrical training, they I remember when I started teaching training, it was like really whoa. Do you think it would be beneficial for electricians to consider going on this certificate?
I would actually recommend they go. The Asset Management Academy, they do an e-learning course on it, especially now we're in lockdown. But there is also, I don't know if I'd recommend electricians to go on it. I'd probably suggest lead electricians, foremen, go on. Anyone with a client interface, go on it. I would definitely recommend business owners, engineers, and managers within a business, finance directors, all go on this so they can help people who are doing tendering. In all fairness, the domestic house basher, as you can probably tell,
designers,
it's not for designers. Yes, but only in the context of the designer would probably help the business tender and bid stuff better. It's understanding where you sit in the big picture. And when you watch the big picture video, you'll see. Yeah,
the things like you've explained about the life, understanding the value in the life, and
Oh yeah, God, yeah. But that you could do that as a separate module. So if you went to one of these training organisations and said, "Hi, I run a business and I've got 2,000 construction guys but 50 designers," then I'm sure you could actually get the certificate run for the designers, and they would purely want to focus on the total cost of ownership and how they select stuff for their design. But the value is making them think outside of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that's great. I mean, we've mentioned that the PS documents 55.1, etc.
PAS, yeah, PAS 55.
One of them was freely available, wasn't it? The third one.
The anatomy is freely available.
Yeah.
The competency requirements is freely available.
We'll put links on the YouTube for that.
Yeah.
And that's good reading to carry on from this journey.
The anatomy will be a far more polite and a focused version of what I've just told you. But yeah, it's just interesting, because if you just start applying it to how you think, how you tend to work, how you put a tender return, the initial questions, the initial engagement, how many contractors write to an employer and say, hi, I want to obviously go onto your supply chain. I'm really interested to know, are you a business that does asset management? What accreditations do you hold? Because that immediately tells you how to tailor your approach, doesn't it?
Well, it's fine. I've just looked at the chat. There's a gentleman called Tom Elner. Thanks, Paul. Free learning place available to randomly selected person on this call. Email me to request to be in for a win. So there's an email address, tom@amacademy.com. He'll offer one person here a free learning place. That's great, Tom. Thank you very much.
I had to pay for mine, by the way. just to be clear, Tom, I had to pay for mine. And I paid for it as well. So
anybody email him, we'll let he can confirm with us if you're in this. But I mean, just say SparkyNinja webinar.
That's fantastic, Tom. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, and do it. Let me know what it's like, because I don't know where to start, to be honest, Paul. I don't know if I need to go into 55,000.
Just remember
where
something.
Do I start, mate?
Just remember something. It doesn't matter where you start on that journey, so long as you start, and you're going to start where you're comfortable, which is the asset acquisition delivery, where you're comfortable. It's working out. Yeah, this is why the career I've had, I'm fortunate. I went and did safety qual. Now remember something, my employer didn't develop me, I developed me. Yeah. I went and did NEBOSH safety. I went and did my asset management certificate. I paid for that. I paid for it myself because I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand. I wanted to put the jigsaw pieces together. And this is why I am the way I am.
There's been some good comments about that certificate that you did, where you put the EAWR on that, and some people have said we put a copy. I mean, we can put this project. I think we should probably work on mastering that to something that you can put on a PDF for people.
In all fairness, I created that. I can't actually find the original document. That was an extract from the document into the PowerPoint, and it was a struggle to fit it. But I probably should create something on Excel or in Word that can be smart. Pretty smartened up, maybe, or maybe we can put it somewhere, or create an email link where people go around improving it and changing it and adapting it. And
and also I'll get to the questions in a minute. There was a mention about a lot of electricians don't even. Here you go. Most Sparks I know have never even read EAW regs. Webinar on EAW regs in the future, maybe. He's questioned. Do you think we could do a webinar going through the EAW regs?
You mean you want to do the live challenge of EAWR to Chapter 13?
We are a couple of sad people.
We are a very couple of sad people. In all fairness, this is brand new, so this is fresh off the print. Yeah. Yes.
We put something together for him.
I don't disagree with him. A lot of them don't do electricity at work regulations on a day-to-day basis, and that's the thing. If you want to level up your career, if you want to grow and develop, when you start to learn this stuff, because I sat down one day reading the regs, I think it was 17th edition Amendment 1, and then a bloke had the electricity work regs up on the screen, and my brain just went, hang on a minute, I'm reading a statement here that maps to that. Hang on a minute, has someone literally took the electricity work regs and just written this book? Because again, me being novice, someone just written loads and loads of detail as to how to comply with it, because we don't read this. And then that was it. That got my brain going. The next thing you knew, I read this a few times and started going, there's nothing in this electricity work regs that isn't already in the wiring regulations and vice versa.
It's amazing how much stuff is in those HSC publications electricians don't catch, because the industry doesn't tell them to read those books. They tell them to read the regs, get this code breaker, buy this book. They never say, hey, go grab HSR 25, go get HSG 85. They never do that.
Sometimes, and it's worth saying, from a resource management perspective, sometimes it could be argued it's better to keep people in the positions that they're good at rather than promote them and develop them and let them grow.
Keep them where they are. Yeah, I know.
If you can't find the decent trades and you've got people who are really decent, If you and don't get me wrong, I don't endorse it at all, but I've seen it.
No, it's completely anti the level up, isn't it?
It is the anti-level up, yes. But
Yeah.
I've seen people doing that, treating people badly to keep them in a job that they're good at rather than promoting them upwards. Why? Because what did I say at the start? We promote incompetence as a society, sadly.
I agree.
And once you accept that when you're promoted, you're incompetent, then it's okay because you'll go on the journey to plug those gaps.
Okay.
Any comments? What's it? Rob Preston's one about you should ask for the asset management plan. Yeah, bang on. Test sheet downloadable, SparkyNinja and E5 website. E5 website, God, I've just, oh yeah, no, I'm sure we'll find a way of putting it on somehow. Dave, you can put it on your website. You've got code for it.
Yeah, we'll make it available.
I've got a laptop with me struggling to figure out what the internet is. Free. Does anyone have any questions at all? I know this has been a brain melter, and I apologise for those watching in YouTube on replay.
So Phil asks, is there a set cost to ISO approval accreditation, or is it linked to a turnover? So is the cost of anything linked to turnover?
Depends on the accrediting organisation, actually. You'd have to go to a body that does audit. I mean, you have to pay for an auditor's time. I mean, we have an auditor come in every year. And what he does is every year he'll do like a surveillance audit, and every 3 years he does a full audit. So you have to pay for an assessor or more than one assessor's time. So you are looking, depending on the system you're implementing, ISO being the smaller one, 9001, 55001, there's 39 steps that you can look at. So over a period of time, you're going to be sampling and digging in and looking and guiding, because audit is a guidance tool. It's not a, you've done this wrong. It's a, you might want to improve that. I've identified a gap here. And then the business can independently be told, level up, improve, close the gaps.
Yeah.
And that's where the personalities come into it. People and their personalities, sometimes tribes don't and refuse to work together. And that's where the auditors can come in, identify the issues, and then actually say, well, no, I can see that, and I don't even work for your company. You need to deal with your tribes. You need to deal with this because it's costing you money. The risk tribe will see it, the corporate people will see it, and then they will implement change.
I've had some issues before with tribes on businesses where I've tried to work with a food manufacturer, developing electrical safety rules procedure and executing that, and you'd have the health and safety tribe come on board fully with the engineering tribe, but then the hygiene tribe, which were supposed to work in one direction, would absolutely just, well, food industry and hygiene has always been an ongoing problem. And we had, the solution was a huge investment in improving switchgear and stuff up to IP69K.
I think we have some asset management experts watching this as well.
Do
Georgia Smart, PS reads subject specific guidelines 15 to 17, no self-interest. I'm sure her name's probably in that book. Bless them. Yeah, no, one of the things also, communication breakdown, how does it destroy asset plans? This is the thing. Personalities can make asset management or destroy asset management. The key is to make the system, to make the backbone of it so that it becomes people-proof, and the things that people can do is contribute and make it better.
Yeah, SSG 1517. Okay, interesting.
I've got copies of all of them. I'm sad.
Awesome. Going back to Gary's question earlier, which you said would return to, how can a contractor demonstrate being more asset management friendly for initial meetings with the client?
Understand the language, take an interest in the client more.
You said ask the question. Ask
the question. Yeah. So, for instance, if you get an inquiry from Trenitalia C2C, I'll use my company as an example. I'd expect someone to Google search who are Trenitalia, parent company, £5.2 billion expenditure, Italian based. What accreditations do we hold? What accreditations are we required to hold to run a railway? Because we hold loads. I can tell you now, virtually every one of their logos, we hold them. Everything, people management, environmental, energy, asset management. They may not all fit, but they will fit eventually, because that's the whole point. Get the systems in place and then go to a total management system where they're all integrated, all combined. That's a journey that goes past my career, Dave. I said this at the start. Asset management is, I should have the foresight before I retire to say, in the next 50 years, when I'm writing my plan. So what I generally tend to offer a bit of advice is, when you're an asset manager, you should have a 2 or 5 year plan, a 10 to 20 year vision, and a 30 to 50 year hallucination. Okay. But it's serious, because what you're going to do is, for the next person who steps in and becomes the electrical mechanical asset manager,
Exactly.
he's going to be able to go, oh my God, what a result. All the data, everything.
That railway is not going to close down when Paul Meenan leaves, is it?
No, it will carry on going. And hopefully it will carry on improving and getting better. And that's the key to the role. Whatever job you have, no matter where you are, the key is to always leave it better than as you found it. Yeah. And that's the battle. And trust me, there are people watching this, and it can be a battle. And I've had many a battle, but I've still left things in a better. When I left the Docklands Light Railway, I left them with a suite of asset strategies for the next person to pick up, so that those years of effort were not wasted. That level of risk and knowledge wasn't wasted. And that's kind of quite nice to think about in that context.
Phil says, so in regards to whole life cost, taking the cheapest installation option can often be the wrong decision. I wonder how that could reflect on inspection and testing, for instance, where a cheap option may miss important defects which later burn down the premises or worse. How can we convince asset managers to consider this?
Sorry, say that again. Where are you on?
This is the question. This is Phil's question from over an hour ago. So life cost. Think about life cost.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of electricians and contractors are struggling to successfully obtain inspection and testing work due to things like price per circuit arrangements. So it clearly is evident that the asset managers or people on behalf of those clients aren't really getting that understanding about the value of the work.
Well, and so there's a couple of things you could say there. Is one, the line of sight is gone. There is no line of sight. And two, you could also say that those people ordering the work, their personalities may be corrupted. And also they may not be working for an asset management organization. They may be working for an organization that says, I have to spend £15 million a year. I'm going to employ a manager or a director to make that £15 million go down to £12 million. And his way of doing it is to screw the contractor, screw the price per circuit down, and he'll get a bonus of 500 grand, because there's a logic to that. There's no logic in the long term. No. In the long term, that's not asset management. That's just capitalism, commercialization, just rubbish. And this is why government, especially, mandate a lot of their contracts now. You will, as an organization and a delivery entity, adopt an asset management approach that's fully auditable, fully traceable. So, for instance, if I go to an electrical contractor in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, all of the records, the emails, the purchase orders, the scopes, the quotes should all be available for audit.
Yeah.
You know, and that transparency. When you're doing social housing, or you're doing a race course, and you're getting 99p a circuit or £2 a circuit, or they're just toss pots, to be perfectly frank. I can't think of a nice word. They're just the wrong parts of the industry that the industry bodies need to be weaning out for education.
So could you conclude then that ISO 55001 should, in theory, be a mechanism to eventually quash some of that in practice?
I think the more the industry bodies realise that they should be encouraging the electrical industry and the construction industry as well to adopt some of these principles, I think slowly over time, I'm talking 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you will start to see some marked changes. Yeah. Because value in asset management isn't necessarily short term. Value is the life of the asset. If I pay you £1 to test a circuit which fails 2 years later and burns down a building that I then have to spend £16 million rebuilding, there's no value in that. But if I pay you £25 per circuit to correctly inspect and test and tell me what the risk is, and you say evidence of thermal effects, burning, cable undersized, breaker oversized, etc., and I've done a proper qualitative EICR, that saves me £16 million. The trouble is, how do you measure that? Because it's very hard to measure the early proactive steps. And the more proactive you are, and this is one of the things I've always had in my career, is I've been on the contractors from day one. At the end of the job, we don't have to snag much. There's no big rows. There's no kicking off, because it's all happened at the start of the job. So the more work you do at the start, the less work you have to do at the end. But you don't realize it unless you're one person. I did one project where one of the subcontractors went, God, job's coming to an end and we're normally at each other's throats. Now we're out here drinking a beer.
Again, in my experience as well, different companies of different scale structure actually behave slightly differently, because like thermal imaging, which I do, I won't get many factories ask me to come and do thermal imaging for their factory. But what I will have is the main company owner, the group business, which owns the 50 factories, they'll ask me to do the work. And so instead of each individual factory, they'll have to pay a bit of it, but the whole business will actually sponsor the project. So it's, because it's in their interest over the larger scale. Then, and sometimes risk management does kind of work that way, where individual factories don't take so much considerations with this, but the actual group organization actually does have a lot more of an understanding on asset management.
I think companies that are doing asset management over years evolve to the point where they start to optimize. When they start to optimize, they sometimes realize that maybe it might be worth having their own direct labor organizations again, rather than subcontracting out, owning the risks themselves, investing in themselves for the long-term benefits.
There must be more value in that for many.
Capitalism drove contracting and subcontracting and all the rest of it. Asset management is kind of not the opposite of capitalism, but it does rub against certain parts of it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
In my view. Only in my view, not any other organisation.
No, I agree. Question from Tom. How can building suppliers help out building contractors in making them sure they are buying the right product first time around to help them save cost in the long run?
Probably doing a little bit more work than what they do at the moment, because you have two different types of suppliers, don't you? Like you get the contractor who will just go to the wholesaler and say, do me a lighting design. What fittings did you use? There you go. It goes into the ether and that's it. You're lost forever. Whereas the decent contractors will go, right, what are you actually looking to achieve? Do you have anything? Do you have any plans? Do you have any documents? Do you have any intended use? Can I understand this better? Can I go on this journey? Because once you go on that journey, you'll stay on that journey with people. But also I've found in my experience where I've gone on this journey with lighting suppliers, I'm not going to mention them on this, where I've asked them for their declarations of compliance to ensure they conform, to find that they didn't have any. And after 6 months of fighting the lighting manufacturer, their director wrote a letter saying, I'm compliant, I can self-declare. Couldn't evidence any of it. That becomes a risk to the asset manager. Failure rates, you then start to look at and you realise, hang on a minute, these lights fail quite a lot. There's hundreds of thousands of them on the railway or in streets. Nobody's looked at this. Asset management makes you look at it. The contractors that get that will be able to far better at selecting assets to help clients.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm wary.
Yeah.
I'm wary because I've just read the comments saying, is this seriously over 2 hours already? Apologies.
Yeah.
You're getting value there, I suppose. Hey, I haven't even scratched the surface.
Well, no, that's why I didn't kind of bring questions up in the middle. I thought I need to let you get through those slides, to be fair. Phil says, should we not be conversant in the electricity at work regs and pure before even considering taking on PIR work, periodic inspection work? We must make decisions against those.
Yes, I would suggest before you even go on a 2391 course, one of the entry requirements is on day one, you sit a test on your knowledge of the electricity at work regulations.
Yeah.
That would soon counteract the watering down they've done on the course.
Without going into my my annoying SparkyNinja mode of saying, the people authorised to develop these qualifications aren't doing enough, I would agree. Yeah,
the beauty of everything we're doing at the moment, Dave, not just with what you're doing or what we're trying to do as E5, is the industry, thanks to the ever evolving or emerging technologies, we are never going to stop leveling up.
No.
We're never going to stop improving, adapting, utilizing new technology, learning, sharing knowledge, questioning, querying, looking at different compliance. You and I both know we've been looking at some really weird and funky stuff as far as standards goes and new technology and, wireless charging of cars and also it never stops.
No.
But asset management is the almost putting the sensible, slow, okay, if it's never stopping, how is this financed? How do we, because we can choose, it's like asset management, I can choose not to adopt the 18th edition of the wiring regs. As long as I make an assessment as a technical person and the business risk people go, oh, okay, yeah, if Paul says, actually, what are they, new devices that won't work on the railway? Great, why do I need them?
See, this is the flip side of this, you see, because I know when I look at the value I can provide for a service, I can go to an archive of standards and I can give all the waffle, all the information. But as we showed earlier on, to the end person, that's of little to no value if I can't actually then relate that to how it impacts them in their business.
The biggest danger that contractors bring to asset managers at the moment is they go out and they do EICRs to the current standards. And the current standards, as we know from when they were installed, are a huge leap. Every 2-3 years, this change. So yes, well done, contractor, assessing to the latest standard as we should do. But how do we then transpose the risk that that brings to a client? Because the client will see a certificate that says unsatisfactory, and they're immediately going to go, oh, bugger. And they're almost being forced to upgrade electrical installations that weren't actually bad. I mean, this is what we've said this on our podcasts. Will there eventually be a mandated arc fault detection? Well, if there is, and someone C3s or C2s it, then they better have a device that works on a railway with the right pollution degree.
The device is too restrictive right now.
And also contractors are seen as money grabbing. Oh, look at all the list of remedials, I'll do that for you. And that's not right. If they're gonna identify an issue in proportion to the risk. I'd love to see an EICR that says you've got 25 C3s. By the way, all of them, actually, they are C3s. And I could genuinely say, look, you don't really need to do them, because the only reason they're there is because of a current new regulation that doesn't affect the safety, operational performance of what you have. They really are nice to haves. And that's where that assessment criteria probably kicks in a little bit better.
I think there's a number of different directions that we're seeing that the EICR as it stands today needs to move into, or needs to evolve into, or bring into. I don't know. We'll have to start doing some work on that. All right.
Now.
Ian says, are risk assessments an asset that can be valued, and how when looking at whole life costs? How can risk assessments be considered an asset, and how are they valued when considering whole life cost?
I think risk assessments are, I'm going to use an analogy. Risk assessments are the backbone of any good asset management system. To be honest with you, I mean, the underpinning, if you looked at it as a building, underpinning any asset management system is your foundations. Your core structure, your spine of your building is risk assessments. Without risk assessment, I'm not talking about task specific, because we do them verbatim. But understanding the risk that you have in owning a piece of infrastructure is incredibly powerful, because when you come to that realization, when I was at DLI, I had 49 stations. Okay, I had to understand the condition of those electrics. One of the key things that I looked at was the EICRs. I looked at EICRs, amongst other things, because there's mechanical plant cooling, signaling, power supplies, all sorts. One of the things that came out of it was EICRs all passed. Hooray, great, good success. Good. But we know from previous E5 stuff that RCDs don't work when they're affected by DC current. The guys doing the work to reduce risk did the work at night. To reduce operational performance did the work at night. We now have a residual risk. We now have a residual risk when none of my RCDs will work when I need them to work. So one risk reduction measure makes the other risk it makes the other risk up here. But nobody knows about that risk.
Because you don't identify it.
No, we haven't identified it. Because we haven't plugged all the gaps. We haven't had the two tribes talking, or the output from one tribe has gone nowhere. And no one's done a review. Without
saying too much about this, I've seen this recently. Obviously, there's the pack testing sector is saying, all businesses are shut down. Let's go and test. There's an area of the code of practice that says this is in service inspection. You're supposed to speak to the user of the equipment. You're supposed to observe the equipment in use. So there's an area that's not being covered there.
But the pack testers never talk to anyone when they go and do pack testing.
That's again part of the problem. Yeah. But right now, I mean, I've even seen the industry, leaders say it's a great time to go and get all that work done. But the code itself says that, the first thing you should do is speak to the user of any known issues, any known concerns with the equipment. So there's a whole area of assessment of risk that's being excluded from that work. But, it's funny how things are interpreted.
Silos, tribes, lack of competence.
All right, Sean says, Paul, you're fortunate enough to have a decent level of understanding of electrical installations. Is this background essential as an asset manager, or could it be supplemented by quality advice, contractor?
No. The best asset manager I've ever worked with is a lady I work with at the moment called Rachel. She's awesome. She has no technical background. She genuinely constantly worries about not having a technical background. I can tell you now, you put her in the room with any electrical contractor and she will go toe to toe with them. She's brilliant. You don't need the technical. It helps. And again, as I said earlier on at the start, first thing is respect and ensuring that everybody has a viewpoint. And with asset management, you've got to have respect for each other. You've got to respect each other's technical ability, their passions, but also you've got to have the conversations you can interpret. So I've got a great electrical background. Yes, my contractor can sit there and I'll end up telling him the regulations that he's supposed to be telling me, which is really weird. But to the non-technical one, they will expect that contractor to take them on a journey of understanding risk, life cycle delivery,
Right. So
total
Sean's,
cost impact, operational output.
So
Sorry,
he says, can it be supplemented by quality advice of contractors? Yes, it can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course it can. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Robert says, what can designers of installations do to help asset managers during the life cycle of an installation once it's been installed and the designer has moved on?
Sorry, repeat that again. What was the first bit? Sorry.
What can designers of installations do to help asset managers during the life cycle of an installation once it's been installed and the designer has moved on?
Okay, now you've really annoyed me. Designers, my pet hate, my bugbear, my just thorn in my side as an asset manager. Designers will only do what they're paid to do. And if you want the designer to do any whole life cycle modeling, you will be paying them to learn it and then give it back to you. Whereas you're better off sitting them in a room and doing it with them, I have found. Designers will only give the minimum. They will want paying, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this out loud, they want paying twice for everything. And if you want them to do something fun and innovative, you're paying them to go on a journey of education. The design industry is just this fat part of the construction industry that could be so much leaner, and is desperately lacking competent resources, and is led by architects who like visualization of everything. And I think it's one of the root causes of many problems in construction. I can genuinely say in my years of construction, most of the problems have always sat down to competence of the design house. Asking them to deliver whole life assessments. I have never sat in a meeting. In fact, I'll give you an example of one. I sat in a meeting with a brand new railway station being built, and it was a beautiful glass and steel building surrounded by trees with green glass blocks. So I was like, why have you put green glass blocks? Oh, it looks lovely. Okay, how do I maintain them? Where do I get them from? Oh, you get them from Malaysia. No. What's wrong with just brickwork? Brick and glass. What's wrong with traditional methods? Oh, well, you know, and you get to the point where it's the architect wanting to win an award.
Yeah,
to make it look pretty.
It's a prize piece. It's a picture
yes,
for the
and
website.
architects. Right, if you could have an MMA match, asset manager, architect. Okay, just on one part of what an asset manager looks at, that constant hindrance of assets that come into use, architects never mapping out or giving significant detail or understanding or information, but they end up building all these monstrosities that win them architectural awards. You know, look at Excel. We've recently, in the coronavirus, people have been saying that Excel, since it was built, was never maintained. Yeah, there was never sufficient information for it to be maintained. I worked on the damn thing wiring it. It had more drawings than you can shake a stick at. Someone didn't manage the data. Someone obviously didn't produce maybe an access and maintenance strategy, which the designer should do to comply with CDM. The amount of times I've sat in rooms with designers and they've gone, oh, well, you know, you'll have to maintain it by dangling a bloke off a rope. No.
Right. Well, yeah.
CDM. Hello. And then the minute you mention CDM, it's like a swear word, and they go all quiet. And they go, we didn't think of this. Yes, because an architect led it. An architect didn't think of CDM because that was some other tribe in his design house's business. So yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Just all right. Wound up now.
But no, I can completely see where that's coming from. We've done work in the past on systems that were badly designed. All right. Sean says, one of your points on new technologies, okay? On your point of new technologies, do you allow for equipment upgrade requirements that we cannot currently foresee?
On your point of new technologies, do you allow for equipment upgrades?
Equipment upgrade requirements that we currently... Let's say, for example, we're talking right now about inductive charging for electric vehicles. So
Yeah,
if you had a railway, would you consider some infrastructure?
So yes, I will always future-proof, but it's a bit of a weird one because I will future-proof power supplies, knowing my power supply demand will go down, but also knowing that there is a potential for an increase in EV charging. But I also then have to factor in the fact that PV will be coming. So I'm putting PV at the moment, which will reduce my load, but I'm not changing my fuse sizes on my head. I'm actually making sure it's constant and making sure I'm building that capacity into my service supply, and also predicting when like bridges are going to fail, because they'll end up being a new lift.
I guess what you may end up having to think about is obviously you've got rooms or switch rooms that right now are just on a public supply. Yep. Like you said earlier on, you may have to consider extending them to accommodate standby or stationary batteries or things like that.
Or you could do what I'm doing. So reconfigure the supply so you have essential, non-essential. So we've deemed stuff on the railway revenue critical, safety critical, and non-essential effectively. And the revenue critical will be ticket machines, TVMs that passengers use to buy tickets, because that collects revenue for the railway and everything around that. There'll be safety critical, emergency lighting, fire alarm panels. Yeah, stuff I need to get people out safely. Everything else is fortuitous. It's nice to haves, unless it stops me running the service. Then I could deem it operationally critical, but generally, fundamentally, lighting, fire alarms, I could sell tickets.
Fundamentally, you have to still be able to take revenue, and you still have to have safety.
It gets more complex when you go into data centers. By the way, we're doing a podcast on data centers soon. So.
All right.
Any other questions, or are we?
Eddie's got one. Quite a few parts of asset management is what we do already without knowing it. More of a language and data. I can see how this could really work if more people understood the basics of asset management.
That's why we're doing this webinar. Because
we may just break this down into more more shorter, more expanded discussions on little parts of this in time.
Yeah, I'm sure if there's stuff people want more stuff explaining on, maybe we can take it into the podcast series. Maybe we can get some guests in from the asset management industry, and then go from there and break it down and maybe do some specific stuff.
Okay, right. Questions are done. So let's just pop into the chat and see if there's anything else we wanted to comment on. A couple of guys have shared links to some of the standards. Thank you, Rob.
Bet they have.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, good. Cheers, Paul and Dave. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any last comments or questions? Because we're going to wrap this up.
Steve Huckle made a comment. It's some Sparks aren't interested in upskilling. I can't help them. If they don't want to help themselves, I can't help them. I'll spend my energy on the people who want it.
If you go back to look at the podcasts that we've had where it's Paul and I've talked about this. I said we need to flush some away. We've had too many people authorized into the industry who are authorized badges, all badged up, and they don't give a damn. We need to find ways to allow them to get flushed out.
Yep, totally agree.
We have a skill shortage, but we don't have a shortage of authorized persons, which is stupid.
Yeah,
we have more people authorized into the industry. They don't have the skills, and they won't push themselves on a journey to learn and improve. We need to find ways, license to practice or similar, to flush them out of the system.
Yeah, apologies for the length of this, by the way.
Yeah,
you've had like 14 days learning in 2 hours and a bit. So,
well, all right. Another shot. Yeah, Sean. Sorry. Well,
Yeah, Sean. Yeah,
Sean. I have dust on my screen. Look, if you want it to stop talking, and we'll stop talking back to you. All right. Cheers, guys. This is going to be uploaded as a video on the E5 channel with all the things that we've mentioned. Paul's going to then source and add below.
It's going to be on yours, and then it'll eventually appear on our one.
We'll put it on E5.
It'll be on.
Yeah, okay. E5 first. Sorry, mate. I can put it on mine later because we want people to get this information.
Oh, okay. I'm not fussed. Other than that, thanks for this. It's been and if anyone wants a copy, just email the info, and I'll happily send you a copy of the presentation, the slide deck. Do the work yourself, grow it.
Barry says, "Thank you, men. The hill just got steeper." But,
sorry. Now you can see my mindset.
Yeah. All right. I am going to click end meeting. So thank you, Paul. Thank you for this, mate. I know
you, brother.
You put a lot of work into this, buddy.
Yeah.
I've got some reading to do, because a lot of this I've heard you talk about this before, but I'm gonna have to dive into some of these and kind of dig into it.
Cool.
All right, guys.
No worries.
See you later.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.